Good afternoon, boys and girls. Today is Thursday, May 7th. It looks like it's a beautiful day outside today. It's a little chilly, but at least the sun was shining this morning. I went for a run already this morning and got some exercise in. I hope you've been finding ways to get outdoors and get some exercise still with all of this stuff going on. So, especially because the weather hopefully will be getting nicer. This weekend I heard some cold and maybe possibly snow, which is crazy for May, but hopefully it'll start getting warmer so you can get outside and start doing some fun spring things outside. So today I'm here to continue our read aloud of The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. We will be reading chapters 14 and 15 today. Here we go. Chapter 14. At first, the others thought that Edward was a great good joke. "A rabbit," the hobo said, laughing. "Let's chop him up and put him in the stew pot." Or when Bull sat with Edward carefully balanced on his knee, one of them would call out, "Got yourself a little dolly, Bull." Edward, of course, felt a surge of anger at being referred to as a dolly. But Bull never got angry. He simply sat with Edward on his knee and said nothing. Soon the men became accustomed to Edward, and word of his existence spread. So it was that when Bull and Lucy stepped up to a campfire in another town, another state, another place entirely, the men knew Edward and were glad to see him. "Malone!" they shouted in unison. And Edward felt a warm rush of pleasure at being recognized, at being known. Whatever it was that had begun in Nellie's kitchen, Edward's new and strange ability to sit very still and concentrate the whole of his being on the stories of another became invaluable around the hobo campfire. "Look at Malone," said a man named Jack one evening. "He's listening to every dang word." "Certainly," said Bull. "Of course he is." Later that night, Jack came and sat next to Bull and asked if he could borrow the rabbit. Bull handed Edward over, and Jack sat with Edward upon his knee. He whispered in Edward's ear. "Helen," Jack said, "and Jack Jr. and Taffy. She's the baby. Those are my kids' names. They are all in North Carolina. You ever been to North Carolina? It's a pretty state. That's where they are. Helen, Jack Jr., Taffy, you remember their names, okay, Malone?" After this, wherever Bull and Lucy and Edward went, some tramp would take Edward aside and whisper the names of his children in Edward's ear. Betty, Ted, Nancy, William, Jimmy, Eileen, Skipper, Faith. Edward knew what it was like to say over and over again the names of those you had left behind. He knew what it was like to miss someone, and so he listened, and in his listening his heart opened wide, and then wider still. The rabbit stayed lost with Lucy and Bull for a long time. Almost 7 years passed, and in that time Edward became an excellent tramp, happy to be on the road, restless when he was still. The sound of the wheels on the train tracks became a music that soothed him. He could have ridden the rails forever, but one night in a railroad yard in Memphis, as Bull and Lucy slept in an empty freight car and Edward kept watch, trouble arrived. A man entered the freight car and shone a flashlight in Bull's face and then kicked him awake. "You bum," he said, "you dirty bum. I'm sick of you guys sleeping everywhere. This ain't no motel." Bull sat up slowly. Lucy started to bark. "Shut up," said the man. He delivered a swift kick to Lucy's side that made her yelp in surprise. All his life, Edward had known what he was, a rabbit made of china, a rabbit with bendable arms and legs and ears. He was bendable, though, only if he was in the hands of another. He could not move himself, and he had never regretted this more deeply than he did that night when he and Bull and Lucy were discovered in the empty rail car. Edward wanted to be able to defend Lucy, but he could do nothing. He could only lie there and wait. "Say something," said the man to Bull. Bull put his hands up in the air. He said, "We are lost." "Lost? Ha! You bet you're lost." And then the man said, "What's this?" And he shone the light on Edward. "That's Malone," said Bull. "What the heck?" said the man. He poked at Edward with the toe of his boot. "Things are out of control. Things are out of hand. Not on my watch. No, sir. Not when I'm in charge." The train suddenly lurched into motion. "No, sir," said the man again. He looked down at Edward. "No free rides for rabbits." He turned and flung open the door of the rail car, and then he turned back, and with one swift kick he sent Edward sailing out into the darkness. The rabbit flew through the late spring air. From far behind him he heard Lucy's anguished howl. "Ow! Ow!" she cried. Edward landed with a most alarming thump, and then he tumbled and tumbled and tumbled down a long, dirty hill. When he finally stopped moving, he was on his back, staring up at the night sky. The world was silent. He could not hear Lucy. He could not hear the train. Edward looked up at the stars. He started to say the names of the constellations, but then he stopped. Bull, his heart said. Lucy. How many times, Edward wondered, would he have to leave without getting the chance to say goodbye? A lone cricket started up a song. Edward listened. Something deep inside him ached. He wished that he could cry. Chapter 15. In the morning the sun rose, and the cricket song gave way to bird song, and an old woman came walking down the dirt road and tripped right over Edward. Whoop, she said. She pushed at Edward with her fishing pole. Looks like a rabbit, she said. She put down her basket and bent and stared at Edward. Only he ain't real. She stood back up. Whoop, she said again. She rubbed her back. What I say is, there's a use for everything, and everything has its use. That's what I say. Edward didn't care what she said. The terrible ache he had felt the night before had gone away, and had been replaced with a different feeling, one of hollowness and despair. Pick me up or don't pick me up, the rabbit thought. It makes no difference to me. The old lady picked him up. She bent him double and put him in her basket, which smelled of weeds and fish, and then she kept walking, swinging the basket and singing, Nobody knows the troubles I've seen. Edward, in spite of himself, listened. I've seen troubles too, he thought. You bet I have, and apparently they aren't over yet. Edward was right. His troubles were not over. The old woman found a use for him. She hung him from a pole in her vegetable garden. She nailed his velvet ears to the wooden pole and spread his arms out as if he were flying and attached his paws to the pole by wrapping pieces of wire around them. In addition to Edward, pie tines hung from the pole. They clinked and clanked and shone in the morning sun. Ain't a doubt in my mind that you can scare them off, the old lady said. Scare who off? Edward wondered. Birds, he soon discovered. Crows. They came flying at him, cawing and screeching, wheeling over his head, diving at his ears. Go on, Clyde, said the woman. She clapped her hands. You got to act ferocious. Clyde? Edward felt a weariness so intense wash over him that he thought he might actually be able to sigh aloud. Would the world never tire of calling him by the wrong name? The old woman clapped her hands again. Get to work, Clyde, she said. Scare them birds off. And then she walked away from him, out of the garden and toward her small house. I have been loved, Edward told the stars. Here's a picture of him. So she's got him hanging up like a scarecrow, right? Scaring off the birds. Here we go. The birds were insistent. They flew around his head. They tugged at the loose threads in his sweater. One large crow in particular would not leave the rabbit alone. He perched on the pole and screamed a dark message in Edward's left ear. Caw, 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 without ceasing. As the snow rose higher and shone meaner and brighter, Edward became somewhat dazed. He mistook the large crow for Pellegrina. Go ahead, he thought. Turn me into a warthog if you want. I don't care. I am done with caring. Caw, caw, said Pellegrina Crow. Finally the sun set and the birds flew away. Edward hung by his velvet ears and looked up at the night sky. He saw the stars, but for the first time in his life he looked at them and felt no comfort. Instead, he felt mocked. You are down there alone, the stars seemed to say, and we are up here in our constellations together. I have been loved, Edward told the stars. So, said the stars, what difference does that make when you are all alone now? Edward could think of no answer to that question. Eventually the sky lightened and the stars disappeared one by one. The birds returned and the old woman came back to the garden. She brought a boy with her. That's the end of chapter 15 today. And again, we're continuing this journey with Edward. So now Edward has left Bull and left Lucy the dog, and now he is with a different old lady now, and he is being used as a scarecrow, right? And now all of a sudden this little boy comes along. So we can only guess that our journey will continue. He's not quite done yet. So as I said in the other video, I want you to start thinking, making predictions, because eventually this story will end, right? It's not going to go on forever. What is your prediction about where Edward ends up? Does he end back with Abilene, his original owner? Does he end up with someone? And if he does end up with someone else, who would that someone else be that he ends up with? So those are just some things that you can be thinking about, some inferences you can be making as we continue this story. I hope you have a wonderful Thursday. We're getting close to the end of the week. And I will see you all tomorrow, Friday. If you're in Mrs. Putney's class, we have our 2 o'clock Zoom, so I will see you then. And for my rest of my friends, I will see you all next week. I hope you have a great end to your week, and I will see you all soon. Have a great day, everyone.